Okay, guys, so we're going to do some stuff about triangles. I'm pretty sure you all know these things. So when we talk about the types of triangles, question is going to be, do you know what an acute, a right, an obtuse, a scalene, an isosceles, or an equilateral triangle is? So one thing you can do is you can go search it, and you can Google it and find out what these are. I'm going to give you a couple hints. An obtuse triangle is one where one of the angles is greater than 90 degrees. Okay, so that's an obtuse triangle. Okay, a right triangle, well, you should already know that. So that's going to be that one of the angles is 90 degrees, right? It's always going to have that little symbol in there. Now, notice what I'm doing is sketches. So you can tell these aren't exactly perfect, right? And so when we do it, anytime you see something that has numbers in it, some of you have said, well, what if I just go ahead and use a protractor to measure? Well, the problem is you don't know if that's the actual measurement, because what they're going to do is they're going to do a sketch of it, and then you might not get the actual measure of it, okay? Equilateral is going to look like, so this is an equilateral triangle, and what you'll notice is tick marks will tell you that anything that has that same tick mark is the same length. Okay, so an equilateral triangle, all three sides are the same, and just so happens all three angles are the same also. Okay, an isosceles triangle is when two of the sides are congruent, so they'll have two tick marks. Now, since an equilateral triangle has two tick marks, it's also an isosceles triangle. All equilateral triangles are isosceles, but not all isosceles triangles are equilateral. Okay? Okay, and then a scalene triangle is where all of the sides are different lengths. So, like you might say that this one is 6 meters, and this is 12 meters, and this is 15 meters. Okay? All of the sides are different lengths. In an acute triangle, all the angles are less than 90 degrees. Okay? So you have the ones that are based off of their angles, which is acute, obtuse, and right, and you ones that are based off their side lengths, which is scalene, isosceles, and equilateral. Okay? And then you're going to learn more about triangles, but today the biggest thing we want to remember is that the three angles in a triangle always add up to 180 degrees. Okay? All right. Okay, so when we take that in mind, now we're going to look at these, and if they all equal 180 degrees, then we're going to say that the formula that we're going to generally use is going to be that the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle B plus the measure of angle C is going to equal 180 degrees. So all we're going to do is, I might label this as A, B, C. Then we're just going to plug things in and solve, right? So again, we're learning how to find x. We've learned how to solve an equation. Now we're applying equations to the triangles, okay? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in, x is for A, right? And measure of angle B is 100 degrees. And the measure of angle C is 46 degrees. And that's all supposed to equal 180 degrees, right? So now we just solve. So I'm going to combine like terms, right? So I'm going to combine these two. So I'm going to have that x plus 146 equals 180 degrees. And then, of course, you know how to solve, so go ahead and solve that. You're going to subtract 146 from both sides. You're going to get that x equals 34 degrees. Of course, you check this all with your calculator, right? Okay, so x equals 34 degrees. And you can always check by just adding these again to see if they all add up to 180 degrees. because sum of a triangle, if I had the program, what we would be doing is we'd be looking and saying, well, we can move a vertex, let's see what happens. But no matter what, when you add all of the angles, no matter how you move the vertex, if it's a triangle, they all add up to 180 degrees every time. Okay, that's the principle we're using. Okay, now you set up the equation for this one. Now these first two are very, very simple, but the next one gets a little more difficult. So you set up the equation for this. Let's see how you do with that. Hit pause, write the equation, solve for x. Okay, so what you would have done was you would have set that up and said, well, if I have, you would label them, right? You're going to label them. You're going to say 37 degrees is A, B is 113 degrees, and C is X. And then you added those together, right? You got 150, took 150 from both sides, you got that X equals 30. Okay, so really what we're doing is we're setting up a simple equation from two simple problems. You look at this one, you look at the first one we did, they're very, very simple. You're just trying to find X, but it's not going to stay that way. We did these two this way so that you would see it, but then it's going to get a little more difficult, as you can see here. Okay, but we're going to set it up the same way we did this one. Okay, so we're still going to set it up as three angles add up together. So we're going to set up the same type of equation. Now notice when you look at it, they don't just want us to find x. They want us to find the measure of each angle in the triangle. So the key to this is what we're first going to do is look at each, add them up, solve for x, knowing that they all three add up to 180 degrees. Then what we'll do is we'll apply that as we simplify each expression, substituting whatever we found x in to each one of those angles. So we're still going to use what they gave us for angle B, C, and D. Okay, but what we have to do first is we have to solve for what x is. So we're going to have to plug these values into what our original format for finding x and being able to add understanding that adding all the angles of a triangle, those angles all add up to 180 degrees. So we're using information that we've learned to now plug it into an equation and solve that equation. So what we're going to take from that, we know that the measure of angle B is x plus 9. We know that the measure of angle C is 5x minus 5. We know that the measure of angle D is 2x. And that's all supposed to equal 180 degrees. Okay, so now we're going to simplify that. So we're going to simplify the first side. Remember we combine like terms, then we solve for the variable, right? And so we're going to separate terms. X is on one side, numbers on the other. Then we're going to isolate the variable, figure out what 1x is. Okay, those are things we learned in second semester. Okay, so you should be able to simplify this. Go ahead and simplify this. Let's see if you come up with the right simplification. So you should have hit pause and simplified this. So you're simplifying it. Okay, so we come out with x equaling 22. So now what we have to do is find the measure of the angles because that's what they wanted us to do, right? And we're saying that x equals 22. So now what you have to do with each one of these angles now is substitute in x 22 for each x. simplify and figure out the measure of the angles. And at one point, it might be wise to make some predictions. Are any of these bigger than 90 degrees? Are they smaller than 90 degrees? Are any of them, now none of them can be over 180, right? Because that's the limit, because if one of them is 180, the other two angles must equal 0, because the sum of all the angles equals 180. Okay, so now plug the 22 in and see if you can find the value of each one of these. What is the measure of each angle? Okay, so if you simplified these, okay, so for B, measure of angle B, you should have come up with that it came out to 31 degrees. For C, right, you should have come up with it being 105 degrees. And for D, you should have come out with it being 44 degrees. If you simplified correctly. If you didn't, you probably got to go back and look at what you did. You can look at my work here and see if it compares. And again, if you're not sure what you did with this, just look at this, see if you understand my notations. This should look familiar since we did this in second semester, at the end of second semester. Okay, it is a multiple variable equation, but we did a few of those, especially with the hands-on equation stuff. It is a little harder. You have to be careful. Okay. And then as we look at this last one, the quiz on this is to see if you know what you're doing. Can you figure out what the equation for this would be? And if you want, go ahead and solve it. Okay. So the quiz on this problem will be, do you know what the equation would be? Be careful. There's something that's missing there. Okay. Good luck. Okay, now come to class, ask questions. We're going to work on this one in class. This will probably be the example we use. And what you're doing is you're taking now the stuff we learned in second term, which is we learned how to set up and solve an equation. And now what you're learning how to do is apply that equation. So you got to know I'm going to expect to see an equation. That's the key to this. You're learning the sum of all angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees. Now using that understanding and your understanding of solving an equation to solve for x and be able to find what the value of each angle is using what you solved. Okay, good luck. See you in class.